Hello ladies and gentlemen, Raging Demon here. I hope everyone's doing really well. I personally have a bit of a toothache, but I'm going to get that sorted out. So just all that aside, so I'm sure people out there understand what that feels like. It's one of these things you just can't stop thinking about once you have one. Really annoying, but I'll put the whinging aside for now. This episode I wanted to make just to sort of explain to people my history with fighting games and why I like them so much, right? So why do I like fighting games? I don't know, I just enjoy them, but what initially drew me to them was the fact that my family is actually full of actual martial artists, right? So when I was very young, I was like anyone who saw the Street Fighter cabinets at the arcade or saw a fatality performed in Mortal Kombat. I think I mentioned the time I rented Mortal Kombat 2 and was like, holy shit, I just got uppercutted off the bridge onto the pit floor. And I was like, what the hell? A lot of my family members, Jim included, and one of my other brothers, my older brothers, were all actually martial artists. And this is one of our hobbies. It was my life for a very long time. I even used to teach. But we started when we were very young. So I initially started doing judo, right? So my brother, Jim, he was doing a martial art called Hapkido. So I was doing judo, he was doing Hapkido. I eventually swapped judo for ITF style Taekwondo. And this was, probably about 7 or 8 maybe. And I did Taekwondo basically 4 nights a week for 15 years. There was a big gap in there of a couple of years where I didn't do it. Jim, he did Hapkido for several years, and our older brother, he actually went on to teach and I believe achieved his second Dan black belt. I eventually taught myself and had 2 schools and got to 3rd degree black belt, and I've also done Shotokan karate and BJJ as well. My interest in fighting games stems from an actual interest in martial arts. I remember seeing even the early Tekken games Tekken 2 notably, where there was a lot more characters in the roster, that the actual moves matched the fighting styles. And by this point, I'd actually done enough to recognize the fact that these were which styles they were, right? I get especially excited when I'd see Baekdo-san in Tekken and go, wow, he's actually doing real techniques. Obviously, Tekken's grounded, quote unquote, but there's some bullshit and some, mystical and made up shit in Tekken, obviously, but giant moon jumps and backflips and stuff like that just simply isn't doable. And some of the throws are ridiculous. Yeah, so I just thought people might be interested in why I was just drawn to fighting games in the first place. Given this and the fact that me and Jim used to actually fight each other, being very close in age and being young boys growing up in a house full of our sisters were much older and weren't there. So we basically, it was just my mum and the rest was just dudes. We had 2 older brothers and 2 older sisters, but at this time it was just three of us brothers at home. It was a legitimate interest in martial arts themselves. And seeing things like in Tekken 3 where you see Hwoarang doing an actual hyong, a pattern from the style that I'd spent so many years doing, it was through that I got into fighting games. Obviously, fighting games are nothing like real fighting. I know they try, and a lot of people say this or that. They're 2 very distinct things. I continued to do martial arts right up until not that long ago. Like I said, I was doing it 4 nights a week. It was my life. Fighting games have come and gone, but now I'm back on. I had a bit of a gap where I was working away and I didn't play many video games at all. And there was a bit of the arcade was dead. There was a bit of a lull in the industry where there wasn't much coming out. Street Fighter 4 changed this, and then Mortal Kombat 9 changed this as well and got me back in. Onto what sort of inspired, it was sort of like my interest in fighting games. The actual reason I enjoy fighting games is the journey to master characters. The fact that it's just you against someone else, whether it's the computer, whether it's your brother, whether it's your friends, just the fact that it's pure combat in the sense that you are actually your skill against someone else. You don't have to unlock stuff. You unlock characters, but you pick a character, they pick a character, and it's all comes down to your skill, as they say in Street Fighter Alpha 3, right? There's no leveling. Well, there wasn't back then. It's the literal definition of get good, learn matchups. And I found it absolutely fascinating that you could dominate someone else, they could dominate someone, but that person they dominated can dominate you. Just the fact that the matchups and the way it worked wasn't so simple. I loved all the character development in the early fighting games. I talked about, in an episode I've talked about my mains like Scorpion and Akuma and why I like them. And for me, it's just the ultimate you versus someone else. Now, I don't play online all the time. Mostly in the past, I didn't play online because it's just the shit. The net code was shit. The connections were shit. We live on the other side of the planet for most of the people that played the fighting game, so even if the connection was good, it still wouldn't work that well. Sitting there and playing against my friends, and then when they all lost interest and started playing fucking first-person shooters and shit, I never really got into first-person shooters. I just wanted to keep playing fighting games. But I do play online now from time to time. And I just enjoy that thrill you get from fighting someone online, I don't win everything, and I'm above average in some games, but below average in others. To playing fighting games online is to get comfortable losing to the same person over and over and over again till you don't, right? And a lot of people don't have patience for that, and I get it. I love the boss rages, like fighting a boss over and over and over and over. And I think until you can finally, triumph. Sort of, this also is probably why I like games like Cuphead and stuff like that, where you'll fight a boss and you'll go and go and go until you understand it in and out and you can win. My own interest stemming from martial arts, and like I said, I did go through this period where I was stuck working away. I did try to play a few games while I was away, but they didn't, sort of like bringing your console and all that. So it was a bit of a pain in the ass. And yeah, the online was awful. But then, Street Fighter 4, Mortal Kombat 9, MKX, Tekken's always been there. Tekken's had its ups and downs, like Tekken 4, people didn't like, but that didn't really have much online. And then you had Tekken 5, which was a banger of a game, but I was still a sort of high school. I was out of high school when that happened, when Tekken 5 came out. For the record, in Australia at that time, it was not uncommon to leave high school when you were 15 or 16. That must sound crazy to some of the people overseas, but we used to go do trades and things like that. Like Australia is not, we don't have this college culture. You don't go to university just because they expect you to. You don't go to, this has changed somewhat over the years, but we didn't have this culture of going to university just cause and living on campus just cause. We have this culture of you get a job, you do a trade. If you do go to university, it's for engineering or for medicine or law or something where you do need to do it to actually do the profession. A lot of this stuff now is sort of creeping in, lots of degrees that you never use, and you're better off just becoming a plumber or an electrician. But that's the way it used to be here. It's starting to change, and obviously it's not as expensive as United States or anywhere like that. But yeah, so I'd already left school by that point, and I was just, I remember getting the game. And again, Tekken's always sort of been there. It never really went away. But the rest of the fighting game franchises kind of went stale. Street Fighter killed itself by releasing too many games, and Street Fighter 3, people didn't like it, and then the arcade scene died, and it wasn't all Capcom's fault, obviously. Times change. Mortal Kombat, the 3D era, just never really gripped people. They were over the blood and stuff because violence in video games was no longer a novelty. It was pretty much in everything. And I don't think Mortal Kombat needs all that to be interesting, but it definitely was what attracted people to it initially. Is like, holy shit, you can't do that in Street Fighter. So many people have said that. And the fact that they really managed to recapture that and go back to basics in Mortal Kombat 9, but still maintain a modern, art of visual style and graphics and retelling of the original stories. whilst also weaving in and undoing the damage from Deadly Alliance, Deception, and Armageddon, which I maintain are pretty good games. Deception is a game we covered a while ago, and I noted that in Deception they had different fighting styles too, which I thought was cool. So, alternately, my love of fighting games comes from just being a kid in the 90s and loving martial arts, watching martial arts movies, watching Ninja Turtles when I was really young, watching just stuff like that, like Bloodsport even, these things that probably shouldn't have been allowed to watch at the time, were a perfect storm to stoke my interest in martial arts. And I've learnt a lot about I've learnt a lot from martial arts, not just about how to actually defend myself and throw a punch or kick or perform a Hyong, a kata pattern. And, it's been the backbone of much of the things when I apply myself to other things, like when I went to university or how I approach doing a job. Just the fact that you're learning the lesson of just showing up, and how important it is to just literally showing up and being consistent, and seeing yourself go from being bad at something and completely lost to making it look effortless. So I met some really good people, some very good role models, and it gave me something that, although I wasn't bad per se, I did okay at sport at school. I actually was quite good at inline skating, something that was cool in the 90s and a bit of a flex back then. I'd won some competitions for that. But I never really felt like I had, I never really felt like I could excel in anything, because I did skating for fun and I got good at it because it was fun. But this was something where I could see that I struggled and I put work into something I didn't, because martial arts is not all flying kicks and stuff like that. There's a lot of boring stuff when you start out. There's stances, there's drills, there's technique that you have to constantly practice, and then you're like, oh no, not like that, not like that. Minor corrections constantly till you just nail everything. You have to use both sides of your body. It takes time, and there's a lot of grinding that's not fun, right? And this is why a lot of people don't stick to it. So, but being around people and seeing them go from being completely useless, no athletic ability whatsoever, to becoming absolute weapons, and just going through that growth myself and improving. And then when I got my black belt, we didn't give away these junk black belts to like children back then, right? So this is more of a thing now. You see some little kid walk through the shops with fucking 3 stripes on their black belt. It's a load of rubbish, but when you see, we had an age limit. You had to be a minimum of 16. And they didn't lessen any of the requirements. You still had to spar all the other black belts. Non-contact, making air quotes, right? It wasn't very much contact. I ended up with a fractured eye socket, a massive black eye, and broken nose from mine. Or the braking requirements, the perfection they expected with your patterns. Like I was 17 just about to turn 17 when I got mine, and it was one of the things I'm most proud of in my life. And this sort of lesson that you can do something very hard, apply it to anything in life. Like I eventually went on to apply it to learning my trade, getting through university. I grew up in a town, me and Coyote Jim, very working class, not an affluent area at all. It's Australia though, so it's very safe, very comfortable compared to many places in the world. But learning and went to a very rough high school with a lot of people who were never going to do anything. So the best they could hope for, and there's nothing wrong with this, is ending up on the tools as a labourer or something like this. I ended up doing welding, right? So me and Calvin Jim became welders. We did welding apprenticeships, and then I later left and went to university and did engineering. But trying to unlearn the lessons of teachers saying, oh, you can't learn that, or you're dumb, or you're this, or you're that, or you got so much potential, but your attitude sucks, and all this. Whose attitude's great when they're a teenager, for the record. But it was through martial arts that I learned, even though I'm a bit of an ADHD and I'm all over the place, and you can tell that from my podcast, how I jump around different topics very quickly, and I talk quite fast. But I don't think myself ADHD, but I mean, I am a bit of a, I don't know, neurotic in many ways, right? So, but learning I could actually, and proving to myself I could actually learn things I didn't want to learn, but had to. I could learn things that were difficult. I could learn topics like mathematics and physics, things that I got terrible marks in school. I could succeed at these things despite being told otherwise, not by my parents. My parents were supportive, but as you know, your biggest role models are often not your parents, right? Because it means a lot to have acquaintances and things like that, encourage you or give you compliments, right? As people know, like people well, when they give you compliments, you get used to people trying to, and it does mean something, right? But, I often feel a compliment from someone you don't know well, or a stranger, like a compliment about something you did or an ability you have or whatever, it can go a long way, right? It can really pick you up and, let you know you're making progress, So, my family was incredibly supportive, particularly my dad was like, you can do anything, right? And he come from a very poor part of London, where they were told, you can't do anything, not you can do anything, right? Barely read. When he came to Australia because London sucked and there was no work. Just grabbed his family. 2 of my siblings were born there, and just hoofed it over here. Dragged them over here where they knew no internet, where they knew fuck all about what to expect, right? And made a go of it. So my dad had learned this lesson like that. But yeah, it was like I said, I know this is supposed to be about how I like fighting games and why I like fighting games, but I'll tie it back into fighting games shortly. So, but growing up in the area where I did, succeeding at that, getting good, even like I said, getting good at the video games, mastering the characters, being able to win. I went to an arcade in the city here in Perth. It was like a Japanese, like an Asian arcade, where they had Street Fighter Zero cabinets, not Street Fighter Alpha cabinets and stuff like that. That stuff's long gone from here now, but I remember beating Street Fighter Alpha 3 off 1 credit, and an Asian guy. And I know this is a little bit stereotypical, just watching me fight through the whole game, this teenager, and going, wow, that was really good. And obviously there is this stereotype that they're much better at fighting games. And it's because they are, because they're into them culturally. Japan fighting games are massive, right? Korea fighting games are massive. But having the sense that I was very proud that I was able to do that, right? So fighting games pay off effort, right? Much more than every other genre, in my opinion. You take, say, an RPG, unless you're fighting, like, say, Pokemon against other people, or, Final Fantasy or something that's something original, like the original Final Fantasies or something turn-based, you can usually grind your way to victory, right? Or use some sort of exploit. And you can do that to an extent. You can do frame traps and cheeses in fighting games, and sometimes you have to, like Mortal Kombat 2's fucking AI sucks. But there's something rewarding to knowing that you can get to the point and you can get better and you can master the game, and you don't even need equipment or levels or companions or anything, and you can get to a point where this game, you take something where you're like, what the fuck, how do I even do a Dragon Punch? How do I do an SPD, a Spin Pot, or how do I do any of this shit? I can barely do the move, let alone do the move on the spot at will, right? I just find this journey that you go through with a fighting game character to learn them and then to use them, to go from getting your ass kicked to kicking ass. This, as you can tell, there's a thread in my life where I like to do hard things and I like to master them, and I don't always succeed. I do change. I do quick things, right? This might sound a little like a big dump of my thoughts about just learning things or life in general, but I feel like ultimately these are positive things in my life, right? stemmed from an interest in martial arts and then turned into an interest in fighting games. And then it turns into an interest in other types of games. And then it turns into an interest in just other things in general, like academics. And these things can be positive. And there's nothing like putting the effort in and getting the payoff for learning. And so I think this with other fighting game fans is often why easy operation or beginner-friendly mechanics to bridge the skill gap and one-button special moves and that sort of thing, why often there's a bit of anger at stuff like that. Oh, I should be paid. Why should a Dragon Punch be a one-button move? Like, fucking learn it like we did, you know? And I get that. And there is skill. The skill is also in not just learning the moves and the combos, it's actually when to apply them in the matchups and actual fighting itself, right? You can be technically very good but still lose a lot of fights because you don't know when to use it. You don't know how to actually do the fundamentals of a fighting game. I think the magic of fighting games is partially the difficulty in even mastering the basics of the special moves and stuff. And to me, there's a place for the beginner and the casual, because without those people, the franchises don't survive. If you just have a core group of hardcore people, you're not going to sell games, you're not going to be in business, and you're not going to, you know, the industry will not support itself. It will go the way of many of the other studios and genres at the moment that are really struggling. For me, the perfect balance is to let the beginner be competitive and win, but pay off the people that put in the work to learn the manual way to do everything. And to have games that are different. You can have that complicated Tekken style game where you have to have legacy skill and play it for years and years and years to learn characters and matchups and stuff like that. Aside from Bamco fucking it up lately, kind of ruining that with gimmicks and heat mode and all that shit, there's a place for easy games. Not easy in the fact that the meta is easy. There's nothing easy about, for example, Smash. Smash is not easy. You know, and jokes aside where I say it's not a proper fighting game, it doesn't mean it's not a proper challenge to be good at it, right? Learning the controls is easy. It's made that way on purpose. Being the best in the world at it is no different than trying to be the best in the world at Mortal Kombat. It's no different at, you know, the only difference is where the effort and the skill curves come from, right? So there might be an initial difficulty with Tekken. It takes years and years, but that guy who's fighting it out at EVO in the finals is every bit as committed, every bit as committed and locked in as the guy doing the Smash one. You know, pick another fighting game with easier controls or whatever. Dead or Alive, again, very simple controls. Virtual Fighter, very simple controls, but far from simple games. Just because you're good at Tekken doesn't mean you can just jump over there. It's quote unquote easier to learn the inputs games and still be successful, because you won't. It just does not work that way. So there's a place for both. There's a place for the casuals. There's more single player content to get people into the game and learn the game, I think, is the key also for casuals. People, in one of the other episodes, I was saying I don't have time to spend 30 hours to wait for a game to get good. Right, that's true. I think that's true of fighting games. They might take thousands of hours to become an expert, but that doesn't mean you can't enjoy the story mode, right? Or single player. So there is a place for both. I'm not one of these people who go, oh, get good and fucking can't do it, Hadouken, fuck you. No. We need the casuals, but we also need to recognize that people want a payoff for their effort and the work they put in to learn something, right? And that's important too, because without the core audience, you can't survive just off casuals either. That's a bit of a long bit of just an information dump, I guess. Bit of my history of how I got into fighting games and why I like them so much and how they apply to the rest of my life, right? Hopefully that people find that interesting. And I'll see you in the next one. Don't smash the controls, everyone.
That's enough!